Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're here today with Dale Hanson Bourke, and we're actually going to talk about two books she's written. The first one is titled Embracing Your Second Calling, Find Passion and Purpose for the Rest of Your Life. And if you've been following the Find Your Next Calling blog, you will recognize that book because we've featured many excerpts from it. The second book we're going to discuss is titled Strong Girls, Strong World, a practical guide to helping them soar and creating a better future for us all. And this book is recent, just out. Dale's an award-winning writer, editor, business owner, and foundation president who has served on the boards of several international development organizations, including World Vision, Opportunity International, MAP International, International Justice Mission, and others. She's the author of 12 books and has an MBA from the University of Maryland. She's also served as president of the CIDRZ Foundation, senior vice president at World Relief, and publisher of Religion News Service. You can learn more at dalehansonbourke.com. That's DaleHansonBourke.com. So, Dale, many congratulations on all of your wonderful work, and thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So what else would you like people to know about you than what I kind of touched on there?
Well, the most important thing in my life right now is I'm a grandma. So that's what keeps me most excited and probably most busy these days.
That's wonderful. I know the grandparenting phenomenon is fantastic. Let's talk about your publishing journey. What made you start writing books?
Well, actually, I never intended to write a book. I was hired to become the editor of Today's Christian Woman magazine.
Mm.
And I loved the idea of editing magazines. That sounded like great fun. I'd done small magazines. And then once they hired me, they said, you have to write a column. And I said, oh, I can't do that. I mean, I was used to writing on behalf of other people. I really didn't have a voice of my own. I really wrote for other people. So I started writing a column in every issue of Today's Christian Woman. And after a year or two, they said, these columns are pretty popular. We'd like to compile them into a book. And that became my first book, was really a compilation of the columns I'd written for the magazine. And, by then, after having done it time after time, I started developing sort of a sense of what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. So that, sort of one thing led to another. And that's how I started writing more books.
Wow. Wow. Well, I mentioned, this book, Embracing Your Second Calling, Find Passion and Purpose the Rest of Your Life. This was recommended to me by our mutual friend, Jennifer Grant, who I've known for many years. When I was starting the Find Your Next Calling project, she told me about this book. And as I mentioned it to you, there are a few books that I've found, quite frankly, that are really good about this topic.
Mm-hmm.
And I love yours. It's just an excellent book. How did it come about?
It was just a point in my life where I was sort of between things. I had been working so hard and trying to, I don't know what, I don't know what possessed me in some ways now that I look back. I mean, I felt like I had to keep going and keep working and keep doing the next thing. And I got to a pause in my life and I suddenly, realized, wow, I have a minute to think about this. I don't have the next thing sort of coming at me so quickly. And also, Bob Buford had written his book, and I read it and I thought, it's really a good book. It's a great book, and a lot of men really responded to that book. But I felt like women had even if you'd been a career woman, even if you'd done, similar things to the way the men's progress had been in a career, it was just slightly different as a woman, especially as a woman who'd had children. I had always felt like my children were more important than my career. And I think that any working woman still, she ends up being the primary caregiver for the children. Almost, it just seems to happen all the time. And I think part of what I wanted to do was talk about the fact that this halftime concept that Bob Buford came up with, which was so brilliant, which was really, sort of taking a pause and rethinking what you wanted to do with the rest of your life and all the skills that you had. I thought it was slightly different for women. And I wanted to kind of take a slightly different approach. And that's how I ended up writing it when I first got into it.
I mean, I think it makes a whole lot of sense. And I think that whole area is an underserved market still to this day. But having said that, I mean, I found your book very useful, for anyone.
Well, yeah, and I didn't really mean to write it just for women. In some ways, it was, when Bob was writing it, I think, he'd written maybe 10 years previous to my book. And I think, we've all evolved over time. I mean, men have become more involved in caregiving for their children. Men feel the same. My sons both feel very conflicted about, spending time away from their children. I think, it's become much more acceptable for men to have a very important role in the lives of their children, and also to be able to express openly that they want to be with their children, that their career may not be the end all and be all for them.
So speaking of Bob Buford, I wanted to read one of the things he said when your book came out. He described it as the book I prayed 10 years that God would lead someone to write. So
That was
it
so
sounds like
kind of
you
him.
answered his prayer.
That was very kind of him.
Well, I mean, obviously he thought very highly of you in the book.
Well, again, I think that he was speaking, Bob was a wonderful guy. He was a real man's man in many ways, but he was also a very sensitive man. And he was speaking to sort of a generation of men who had never really thought this through before. And again, as I say, I think we've all moved along the continuum. I don't think it's so much a male or female kind of thing. And I really do appreciate the fact that when I was first in my career, I could never, if I was with a client, I could never say, oh, I've got to go check on my children. I had to pretend I didn't have children. I had to be very all encompassed, with my work. And, I remember the first time I was in a meeting and a man said, oh, you know what, I've got to leave because I have to pick up my kids. And I thought, I just wanted to celebrate that a man was finally able to say that. And it sounds really strange now because that happens all the time. But for a long time, men didn't have the freedom to express their concerns about their kids or to really live a whole life that enveloped, being a father as well as being a career person.
I mean, another thing that's changed more recently, both for men and women, is at least some folks can work from home,
Right.
either permanently or more often
Yeah.
and I know in the case of my own daughters and their husbands, that's made a huge difference in terms of,
Huge.
getting people off the bus, or,
Right.
things, many different things, so
It's made a huge difference with my kids too. I mean, my one son is an attorney, and his kids, when I'm at their house, they'll say, "Well, Daddy's downstairs working. We can't bother him, but maybe he'll come up and have dinner with us." And so they kind of know that Daddy's there, but they know to respect his work. And my other son actually works in a different city than his company and is able to stay in that city because it's better for his wife. I mean, these are wonderful things. I mean, the pandemic was not a good thing, but it sure gave us this opportunity that I don't think we would have ever dreamed of. And it's certainly changed the way parenting does happen and the way the kids perceive, where mommy and daddy are. I mean, which is a great thing.
absolutely, absolutely. So here's another endorsement. This one's from David Sims, managing partner of Bridgestar, who says, if you want to embrace the second half of life with passion, power, and purpose, this book will help you take a big first step. And he uses that metaphor, second half of life, with Richard Rohr has
Mhm.
also written, very well about. Do you see that kind of metaphor yourself?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I mean, I would, dream of being able to express anything nearly as well as Richard Rohr. I mean, he's an amazing man, amazing writer, amazing spiritual thinker who I love reading, and I just am always kind of in awe of what he says. I certainly think that, and again, I'm kind of now further along in the journey. I mean, I'm 70 years old now, so I'm definitely in the second half and maybe the last quarter here. But I think your spiritual life, your what's important to you, all of those things just open up so much more in the second half of life, just as Rohr would say. And again, when you're young, I just was talking to some young man who, he was graduating early and he was worried that he was getting behind. And I was like, oh my goodness, slow down. It's okay. You don't, when you're young, you feel like you just are in such a rush to get
Mm.
somewhere. And then you get to this point in life where you go, I don't really remember why I was in such a hurry. But it's also wonderful in this part of life to have just the grace and the ability to stop and listen to people, to pause, to play with your grandchildren and not be impatient. I was impatient so often with my children because I had things to do, and I can be patient with my grandchildren because there's nothing more important than playing with them.
Amen. Amen. Well, in Roar's book too, he talks about a lot about the first half of life being so driven by ego,
Hmm.
right? You kind of need to prove yourself, right?
Absolutely.
And I know I felt, that way much more when I was younger until I finally got over it,
Right.
so to speak.
No, that's so true. I mean, when you, you read things, you read from my biography, I just wanted to kind of laugh. I mean, it's just like, none of those things really mean, I mean, maybe 30 years ago, if you'd missed something, I would have said, oh, and don't forget, and now it's just like, whatever, those were things I did. I don't know. I mean, I'm glad I did them. But, it doesn't mean I don't know. I don't feel that such a need to accomplish or to
It's,
be known by what I've done. I want to be a good person. I want to be a good friend. I want to be a good grandparent. I want to, um, you know, live healthy and do things the right way. But accomplishments are really not part of what I'm concerned about right now.
well, it's a wonderful mindset. So let's talk about the new book, Strong Girls, Strong World, a
Mhm.
practical guide to helping them soar and creating a better future for us all. So how did that book come about?
So I felt a need to accomplish. No, my granddaughter was born. Her name is Evie. She's 4 now. And I was just so enthralled by her. I mean, she's just, my first grandchild, so she was just so special. And watching her and seeing how excited she was about things. And I have traveled a lot. I've had the privilege of traveling around the world and seeing little girls all over the world. And as much as I wanted for Evie, I realized like little girls all over the world are like Evie. They're special and they're full of joy and they have all kinds of ideas. And yet Evie is really going to be extraordinary because she's going to get good health care. She's going to get a good education. She will have laws protecting her. She'll have a family that loves her and tries to take care of her. So when I started seeing the contrast and realizing that Evie, as much as I loved Evie, every little girl in the world deserved what she was going to have. And then I just started reading more about girls around the world. And again, having had my own experiences of seeing girls and knowing that girls especially, boys have it hard too, but girls have it even harder in most countries in the world. And yet there are all these studies from the World Bank and everywhere else that say the best thing we can do to stop the cycle of poverty in the world, to make the world a better place, is to invest in girls. When girls when girls soar, they turn around and take their families with them, they take their communities with them, they take their whole country with them. And so if we can invest in girls, it's really the smartest thing that we can do. So I wrote the book partially because I felt I kind of wanted to give back from all I had been given in my experiences of traveling and the things I'd seen. Um, and I also wanted to help people. The book is pretty practical, even though it's sort of philosophical. It's about what we need to do for girls around the world. But every chapter has at least 2 or 3 things that you can do, organizations you can invest in, things you can do to make a difference, ways that you can, if you feel so led, actually invest in the future of girls.
Well, I love the practical aspect of that. There's so many books that I find, are maybe just theory or history about, a particular issue, but not as much about, okay, what do we do about it?
Yeah, it gets very frustrating, I think. I mean, I,
Yeah.
I get frustrated. Every time, something happens in the news and I get upset about it or whatever, if I don't have some path to take, it ends up just not helping me. I get frustrated. So I really wanted, and again, I feel fortunate that I have had the experience with a number of organizations and and was able to kind of look into the various things that one could do. But I mean, it's everything from how to, how to pack a backpack for a school child. I mean, I did this once. I was at a luncheon. I was at a World Vision luncheon, and we were, one of the activities they had was they were packing backpacks, hard to say, packing backpacks. And you would write a little note, in it and put it in the backpack and send it off. And, I mean, part of me was a little cynical and thought, yeah, right. They're just doing this to make us feel like we're doing something. Well, I was in Jordan meeting some Syrian refugee children, and there were a pile of backpacks. And they were from World Vision, and I opened it up. I didn't find mine, but I found those little notes, and the children were so excited to see those notes. And it was one of those things that made me realize, like, those little efforts that we make really do make a difference in the world.
Mm, very cool. So is the book primarily for parents with daughters or Christian parents with daughters, or is it a global focus, or what's
Yeah,
it
it's for
for?
anyone really. I mean, it's a global focus. It's not necessarily a Christian book. I think that Christians should read it and be motivated. I do talk about a lot of Christian organizations like World Vision and others that I've had experience with, so I know the work that they do. But I mean, again, you know, this is the World Bank and the Gates Foundation and others who've done these studies and come to the conclusion that we really need to invest in girls, that that is the smartest thing we can do. So it doesn't really matter in some ways how you're motivated. This makes sense. It makes sense for the world, and it makes sense for you to be able to make a difference. If you want to make a difference in the world, this is, in my opinion, the fastest way to really make a difference. And one of the things that I've loved about the book is hearing from moms who read it with their daughters
Hmm.
and then say, let's do this together. Let's invest in this charity together, or let's do this project together, or whatever it is. It's a wonderful, I think it's a good tool to use, whoever you are and whatever you want to do.
So how's the book organized?
Well, I try to go through different areas of impact. So I talk about medical issues, I talk about legal issues, I talk about education. I do have a chapter on disability because girls with disabilities are so disenfranchised in the
Hmm.
world. They have such a huge hurdle. So I have a chapter on that. And I think some of it for me even was an education. I mean, finding out that so many parts of the world, girls don't have legal rights.
Hmm.
Women don't have legal rights. I mean, so if a woman, is in an abusive relationship and leaves her husband, sometimes she's stateless at that point. She doesn't even have citizenship because she gets citizenship through her husband, and then the
Wow.
children are stateless.
Wow.
So many places where, there just are protections for girls. Girls can't grow up to want to own a business because girls can't own businesses. Women
Hmm.
can't own businesses.
Hmm.
So I mean, sometimes part of the book is reminding us that we think we've come a long way, and it's not true in all parts of the world. But part of it too is saying, okay, there are really practical things that we can do to change things. Early marriage is something that is such a problem in the world, and there are lots of organizations working to stop child marriage.
Hmm.
So those are the kinds of things that I think we can invest in.
So overall, what would you most like readers to take away from the book?
I would be thrilled if people read the book and did one thing. Just one thing because not only could it make a difference for girls, but it would help them. I mean, I I started out working, well, World Vision was really the place that sort of broke my heart. But I was wrapped up in my own career. I was doing my own thing. And when I first went on a trip and saw the need, and then I was given the opportunity to actually do something and respond, it really changed my spirit. It just changed, it made such a huge difference for me, probably more than the people I was doing something for. And I want people to experience that. I want people to experience the joy of being able to help somebody else, of knowing that they can make an investment and it makes a difference in the world. I think we sometimes get so overwhelmed by all the problems of the world and think, oh, I can't do anything. And we really can.
So let's talk a little bit more generally. for a moment. First about discernment. Have you reflected on the process that you use to
Hmm.
determine what important decisions to make, what important paths to take?
I have, and I think I would love if I had some principles that applied to everybody, but I think I've learned a lot about my own path that, I can share that. I'm a person who is prone to action. If I'm given an opportunity, I'll jump in before I think it through. And so one of the things that I have learned along the way in terms of discernment is to really stop and pray and see if this is really something that I'm supposed to do. Now, that is really not my nature. My nature is, the minute there's an opportunity to do something, to say, sure, I can do that. I can take that on. And so I think you kind of have to know your own nature, because
Mhm.
if you're the kind of person who's like me, you really need some places where not only spiritually, but maybe with friends and others who you can say, hey, would you think this through with me? Am I jumping into something I shouldn't? But if you're a person who's kind of risk averse, then you need to, loosen yourself up a little bit and say, maybe this is something that I should consider. When I look at my life and I think about, for example, you asked me about writing my first book. I, I was absolutely sure I could not write. I couldn't write a column. I couldn't write a book. I could write. I was kind of a menial writer. I was a writer who wrote for other people. I wrote speeches. I wrote ad copy. I wrote those kinds of things, but I was not somebody who had my own voice. And so when I look back and realize that um, every time I took a step, another door opened, that's really exciting to see in my life at this point. But I can also tell you, I probably shouldn't tell you the times when I took steps and I realized, oh wow, I shouldn't be doing this. This is over my head. This is not something that I was called to do. This is not something, um, and it's hard to explain how that happens. But I do think that I've learned to have spiritual discernment and also to talk to my husband and my friends and others if I have a big, decision to make.
But for me, that's been the most important thing is get input from several other people
Mhm.
that know me well. I found that to be incredibly useful. Now, you've coached several clients. What are some of the most common challenges that you've seen them encounter?
Well, I guess I'm not sure. I mean, I don't really do personal coaching. I've done marketing coaching and that type of thing. Um, I think, again, I think that people have to examine who they are by nature and think about who they are and what they're prone to do and what they're called to do and really sort of think that all through. I'm not sure I know exactly how to answer that because it's so individual, I think.
Hmm. Hmm. No, I found the same thing. I try to make a course that's generic in nature. And it's really challenging to do that because especially things like this discernment. We just had a conversation with someone earlier today about this topic.
Hmm.
And, we were commenting on the frustration around that
Hmm.
there's no, one size fits all methodology,
Right.
or a process that an engineer like myself would like be able to
Sure.
recommend, but it just doesn't seem to work that way.
Well, and again, I think that the older I get, the more I learn that asking people questions and letting them just talk and express their own. I think people have the answers in them usually, but you need to ask them questions and draw them out and let them talk, which again is just part of having the space in your life to invest in people and do that
Yes,
with people.
yes, totally agree. Well, Dale, again, many congratulations on all your work. And,
Thank you.
thank you for bringing these books to the world and all the other incredible things that you've done. Again, the titles of the two books are Embracing Your Second Calling, Find Passion and Purpose for the Rest of Your Life, and Strong Girls, Strong World, practical guide to helping them soar and creating a better future for us all. And please check out Dale's website, dalehansonbourke.com. Again, Dale, thank you so much, and many
Thank you.
congratulations.
It's so nice to talk to you. Thanks again.